I don't think that drugs are bad for you. What do I mean when I say that? Well, let's get into it. Look, okay, because drugs, that's a very broad term. Drugs, right? We know there's all different types of drugs, for one. So that's one thing I want to elaborate on, is there's all different types of drugs, okay? So, there's supplements, there are pharmaceutical drugs, there are illegal drugs, like narcotics. There are all different classes of drugs, from depressants, stimulants, psychedelics. There's tons of different things. So it's like, what do we mean? Look, I truly believe deep down that there is a right way to do drugs and a wrong way to do drugs. Again, we're talking about a lot of different things here, so let's not get hung up on this term when I say drugs that just means illegal narcotics, someone shooting up heroin in an alleyway, right? Because that's not really what we mean. Yes, I'm going to talk about heroin. I'm going to talk about some of these other considered hardcore drugs or whatever, but I think it's important to realize that it's most people will understand, most people will agree that something like a supplement, something you take is like vitamin D, or say you're taking a natural herbal supplement or something like that you buy online, or maybe it's some sort of non-psychoactive, non-psychedelic mushroom like chaga, turkey tail, reishi, or something like that. That most people would agree that there's nothing wrong with those. Those don't have psychoactive effects. And when I say psychoactive, what psychoactive means is it essentially changes your brain chemistry and creates altered perception and mood. So psychoactive, not to be confused with psychedelic, psychoactive just means essentially that it gets you high. It alters your state. Versus psychedelic, obviously, we can go into the definition of what that is, but traditionally it creates a very altered state of perception, typically a body high, as well as produces closed-eyed visuals, open-eyed visuals like hallucinations. Now, I said that most people would agree that supplements are okay, right? Supplements are good for you. Good for you. They're fine. They're not bad. And then I think we could go as far as to say as most people would say that medication from the doctor is good for you too, but I don't think it's quite that simple. It's definitely not that black and white, because part of the reason that you get prescribed a medication by a doctor is because they want to make sure that you are taking the right amount, that you are taking the appropriate dose for whatever ailment, whatever diagnosis, or whatever they're treating you for. And because a lot of pharmaceutical drugs actually have side effects. So they want to make sure that it's not interacting with different parts of your biochemistry, interacting with other medications that you're on, because yes, there are side effects. It's not just this blanket, hey, there's no risk, it's totally healthy, just go ahead and send it. And there's a lot of drugs, we're all wide aware of going and watching TV and it cuts to a commercial and there's a advertisement for some medication, some prescription drug that is treating one problem, but then at the end it's like, oh, and you should talk to your doctor if your falls off, or if you can't sleep, or you get itchy, or your hair starts to fall. It has all these crazy potential side effects. So I don't think that we should just be blanketly saying, hey, all these drugs are good and all these types of drugs are bad, because again, it's not that black and white. Just think about SSRIs, which are really common antidepressants that are prescribed to people. It stands for selective. I had to look that up to make sure I didn't f*** it up. So SSRI stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. These are heavily criticized antidepressants with tons of side effects. And so, a lot of times when you're treating one symptom or you're treating one issue, you, by happenstance and by consequence, end up causing another issue or something else. Again, I want to go back to this point of, I think you can use, and I truly believe that you can use all drugs in the right way versus the wrong way. I don't care if it's coffee and caffeine. I don't care if it's melatonin. I don't care if it's a prescription from the doctor. I don't care if it's some sort of opiate like morphine or fentanyl or something they give you at the hospital during surgery. I don't care what it is. I think there's a right way to use it. I think there's a way that you can use it properly as a tool to get a desired effect. And I also think there's a wrong way. I think that's the really big difference between use and abuse. That's why those two words exist, and they're oftentimes applied towards drugs. Because there's a use case. How do I use this drug effectively and safely? And then there's also abuse, which is I'm using this drug too much, too often, or in too high of a dose, where at that point, I'm just abusing it. So I don't care. Like, you can do it with coffee. If I go and I drink 7 cups of coffee to start my day, yeah, I'm abusing caffeine for sure. But if I drink a cup of coffee to feel better, wake up, help to feel more alert or go get some work done, that's a great use, right? And I think that's fine. We can all agree that drinking coffee is totally cool, totally fine, as well as using melatonin. Now, I don't necessarily think that using melatonin is the healthiest thing in the world. However, say you are, up late, having trouble sleeping, and you want to take a melatonin supplement to help you fall asleep, fine. That's the proper use, no problem. Now, when it comes to the doctor, I had a surgery about a year ago, and I was administered, because people will ask me oh, have you done every drug in the world then? It's no, I haven't, I've done a lot of them, but I haven't done heroin, but I've done something stronger. I've done fentanyl. And they're like, oh my God, you've done fentanyl? And I'm like, yeah, at the hospital. I had a surgery and they gave me fentanyl. I know a lot of people are dying, and I know this is not something that we should take lightly, and we should just encourage the use and abuse of all these different types of drugs. But it just goes to show, I was in surgery, I had a lot of pain, and right after my surgery was when the pain was the most intense. And so they gave me, it was I had on a chart a specific amount of dosages I was able to get fentanyl. And so that would be a very appropriate and correct use of fentanyl. They knew that the quality of the fentanyl was very high. It's medical grade. I'm assuming created and curated in a very sterile, safe lab and environment. And then there's also, they knew exactly what the dosages were, how many micrograms or milligrams or whatever it is to be administered per dose. And so it worked very effectively. Felt great, honestly. I was in pain. I said, hey, I need some pain meds. And they were like, okay, we're going to give you some fentanyl. Felt a whole lot fucking better. And I don't think I had really any negative side effects from that. So again, I really want to urge people away from putting things in boxes, right? Saying, oh, this thing is that's not good for me because it belongs in the narcotic group, or because I read something online, or I heard from my health teacher in high school that this is bad, or XYZ. And it's no, the conversation it's a lot more convoluted than that. There's a lot more to be uncovered. And now when we talk about, I want to talk a little bit about narcotics, okay? So narcotics, this is defined as, I have the definition here, a drug or other substance that affects mood or behavior and is consumed for non-medical purposes, especially one sold illegally, okay? So alcohol falls into this category. Marijuana, now you might be saying, well, those are legal. Yes, but they haven't always been. And also a narcotic can be, a drug can be considered a narcotic even though it's not illegal, okay? And so I think that people oftentimes get this sort of mix-up of, oh, let's determine whether something is good for you or not, or whether it's good or bad morally based on its legal status. I don't agree with that at all. And the first primary reason for that is because the legal status of drugs changes all the time. Alcohol was banned in the 1920s. Everybody knows that. That's common knowledge that it was banned, it was illegal, didn't stop anyone from doing it, and also became illegal not that long after that. And it's been legal for a long time, but if you look at alcohol-related deaths, they're the highest on the chart for all deaths across any sort of drug or narcotic. So legal status, definitely out the window. When it comes to narcotics, when it comes to using drugs for a specific reason and recreational, I don't think that anyone should really have the power or whatever to tell people what they can and cannot be consuming. Who's to tell somebody that you can or cannot enjoy a glass of whiskey or smoke a joint or do whatever at the end of the day to relax, right? Who am I to say that one of those is better than the other? Also, if we're talking about, there's all different types of narcotics, right? There's, we would consider in this category, alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, MDMA. I mean, the list goes on. Those are kind of the classic, most popular ones. Xanax is in there. But funny enough, Xanax is actually prescribed. That's a prescription drug. It's got a brand name. It's FDA approved for a specific purpose, general anxiety disorder. And so, yeah. So, I mean, who's to say that whatever drug I choose is worse versus one of the others, right? Like, I just don't think that we can really make those solid arguments, right? Because if we know, if we're keeping some variables the same, which is, hey, do we know that the sourcing is good, right? I'm not saying that you need to go, that you're gonna buy, alcohol on the street that's been made in some freaking warehouse or something. Obviously, we know all the alcohol that we buy is coming from a store that was made in a factory somewhere that has to follow guidelines and regulations and whatever, right? So that's one thing. So long as the sourcing of the drug is safe, we know we have a pure product, something that is free of contaminants, something that is pure, that's not, cut with something else, then I don't think it matters what drug you choose to get your desired result. I mean, just think of it this way. Let's say cocaine was my thing, right? If I wanted to relax, even though it's not really a relaxing drug, but let's just say I wanted to wind. I wanted to wind down, get my mind off of things, just kind of hang out, whatever. And I really liked the feeling that cocaine gave me, right? Okay, that's one thing, cool. Somebody else, it's alcohol for them. Maybe they're a chronic alcohol user, maybe they're alcoholics or whatever, and they drink every single night. Well, if I'm somebody who's gonna sit down and hang out and I'm gonna do a little bit of cocaine and I feel great and I'm not hurting myself, not hurting anyone else, not causing any issues, who's to say that that is worse than someone who chooses alcohol or someone who chooses weed or someone who chooses Xanax or whatever it is? Again, so long as you are not hurting yourself, you're not hurting others, and you're doing it in a controlled environment, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. I just don't. I think you need to ask yourself the question, when you say to yourself, when you say to other people, that's bad, and you're pointing fingers and you're doing this, that's bad, you shouldn't do that, blah, 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 blah. What are you speaking from? Are you speaking from personal experience? Are you speaking from data that you know about these substances? Are you speaking from randomized clinical trials that you've looked into, that are published online, that have been peer-reviewed, that have been, consistently recreated in other studies? Or what? Or are you just speaking from your ass? Or are you just talking about things because you have downloaded a bunch of notions and information from mainstream media or from your parents or from your health teacher in high school or whoever the hell hadn't had that experience or that effect on you that made you think a certain way? I think we really truly need to ask ourselves, are we taking a really fair approach to this topic? Are we really thinking through everything, and do we understand it fully? Or are we just regurgitating information that we heard from someone else? Or are we just taking the social norms and the things that we experience in our culture and then projecting it onto other people without having come up with our own thoughts and opinions on these actual topics? Really something to think about, and I encourage you to think deeper about this topic. That's all for today. That's my opinion on drugs. Take it or leave it, like it or don't. Take what you like, leave what you don't. That's it for me. I'm gonna shut it down. Boom. See you guys on the next one.